Guys, I just want to give you a heads up that this chapter has been edited. It contains sexy stuff that cannot be on the public podcast that runs on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of that. The complete episode with all that sexiness in it is in both the audiobook version, which you can purchase from the Wraith Range shop, and it's in the private member podcast feed, which has the chapters uploaded to stream right from a page on the membership site. So if you sign up to be a Wraith Rain member, you can stream this chapter and a heck of a lot more, and it's all unedited. Or if you purchase the audiobook, you get the full audiobook, nothing edited. And as the actor for Julian and Christian says,
and let me tell you, it is worth it to get past the paywall. Those scenes are steamy.
Yes. Excellent. Excellent.
I really enjoy reading them. I really do.
Last time on Everdark, Damon discovers the wonders of indoor plumbing. He and Julian bathe together, but Julian refuses to feed, as he knows Damon requires blood first. Christian and Balthazar have gone to the Acolyte's house on the property to get more blood for Damon. But a woman from Christian's past has stopped them in their tracks. Everdark, Episode 18, First Kiss. Laura, please rise. You're making my fledgling very uncomfortable, Balthazar murmured, as he urged the acolyte to her feet. Christian had gone still in that way of his that indicated that he wanted to physically take himself out of the equation. Balthazar was in the very early stages of learning his fledgling's true personality. But one thing was becoming very clear to Balthazar wasn't that Christian felt little, but felt too much. Christian resorted to logic because his emotions were simply too much for him. It was a way to distance himself from what was happening. When people or things were out of place, Christian felt that on a deep, empathetic level. Like Laura being here and bowing. That was unnerving his very intelligent, emotional fledgling. And he would put a stop to it. She jumped up with alacrity, which didn't surprise Balthazar. She was always eager to please him most of all. Seeing Christian had thrown her too.
Oh, I'm sorry. So sorry. I didn't mean to address him so informally and...
It's okay, Laura. I'm glad you did,
Christian said stiffly. But he tried smiling along with it, which Balthazar almost found painful in and of itself.
There's no need to call me master or whatever. That'd be weird. Christian's fine. We were schoolmates after all.
Laura was biting her lower lip through Christian's attempt to put her at ease and on the same level. Christian didn't understand, but the formalities were important to the acolytes. Breeding too much familiarity caused hopes to rise. Balthazar had found that out himself. In fact, he had relearned that lesson not all that long ago.
Quite, if that's what you wish, Christian,
she said awkwardly. She cast about a little and then remembered how she was to behave with them.
Are you here to feed, company, or both? I know that Ray is missing you very much, Master Balthazar.
Balthazar grimaced before he smoothed his face into one of blandness again. Ray was one of those misplaced hopes. He was certain that all of the acolytes had already heard that he had taken a fledgling. Ray, above all, would be aware of it. Ray had hopes that he would be taken. Balthazar had toyed with the idea at the beginning. Now that he had Christian, he couldn't imagine bringing in Ray. While Laura did not catch his reaction, his very clever fledgling did. Christian raised an eyebrow. He gave a brief shake of his head, an indication that they would discuss it later. Or not at all. That would be best. Not at all. I will have to deal with Ray. He cannot stay here. It may be best if he is relieved of his memories of this place and me altogether. No, Laura. I think I'd like Sheila to come join us in the deep suite, he answered smoothly, even as his mind went to unhappy places. He liked Ray, but an unhappy acolyte could poison others with unhappiness. It was best that it did not happen. Unlike Ray, Sheila was steady and had no desire to become a vampire. She would be a non-sexual, comforting presence in the room with him and Christian. Laura did a little curtsy.
I'll send up water and wine. Anything else?
He shook his head. And don't worry about taking us there. I'll show Christian the way. Laura did another little curtsy, quickly turned on her heels and headed into the house. Balthazar put a guiding hand on Christian's lower back. He felt the muscles beneath his palm go tense, but then quickly relaxed. While he would respect Christian's need for boundaries, they had to be able to touch one another.
What are we doing? I thought we were getting humans set up for Damon to feed from.
There was a very cute frown on Christian's lips. Balthazar knew he should not find that frown cute. Christian would not like it, but it was nonetheless. We will. But first, I need to feed you, and it's best I feed myself first, Balthazar said, as he directed Christian towards a set of sweeping mahogany stairs that led to the second floor. And this will be a valuable lesson. You'll get to see how I feed from humans.
Will I get to feed from Sheila too then?
Balthazar shook his head and sighed. You know very well you will not be allowed to. You feed from me, and me alone.
Of course. I know that. I just...
Want your freedom as soon as possible? Yes, that was bitterness in his tone. But Christian surprised him by shaking his head.
No, I just want to make sure we have as many options as possible in case we're separated for some reason.
We are not going to be separated for any reason. Balthazar hadn't intended his tone to be so sharp, but the very thought of Christian being taken from him was intolerable. Yet Christian wasn't about to simply allow the subject to drop.
But Damon is now here. We're being hunted by this order. We don't know what could...
We will not be separated, Balthazar repeated. Christian was correct about what all could go wrong, but Balthazar refused to have any of it right now. Worrying about such a slim possibility is not useful, Christian.
I wasn't worried. Not in the way you're assuming. I was just considering all angles. I'm sorry I upset you. I like to be prepared. When Julian and I go on missions, we consider everything that could happen and then go a step beyond that.
Christian explained. Doesn't it distress you even a little to think of being separated from me? He knew he should not have asked that as soon as the words left his mouth. He sounded needy. It was quite ridiculous for him, who had been called a cad too many times to count, was now pathetically pawing at Christian's pant leg. Christian's lips opened, shut again. Finally he said,
I was going to brain Damon with a lamp to save you.
Balthazar let out a laugh. While appreciated, what does that have to do with anything?
It shows that my feelings towards you are growing in a positive direction.
Christian offered. Ah, lamp bashing. A sign of impending affection.
You don't think I'm moving fast enough towards liking you? You want me to swoon over you, but I bet you grow bored with people who do that anyways.
Christian swept a hand through the air. I don't. He thought of Ray. Was it true? Did he grow bored quickly? No, it was just that Ray was not the one, but Christian was.
Then what was that look you got on your face when Laura mentioned this Ray person?
Christian had paused halfway up the staircase. Ray is another matter, as is having Laura call you by your first name. Balthazar tried to get them moving again. Christian imitated a stump.
What are you talking about?
Balthazar glanced around to see if anyone was near. Then he listened for familiar heartbeats. None. We shouldn't discuss this here, but I will say that there is a balance between vampire and acolyte. And if you break those, then expectations can be set that are very difficult to erase. Actually, it's easy to erase them, considering we're Iris, but it causes upset.
But I don't understand. You're saying that having Laura call me Christian instead of Master is the same as whatever happened between you and Ray?
Eyebrows crawled into Christian's hairline. I'm saying that large things start small. Come on, upstairs. Enough stalling. I can hear your stomach grumbling from here. Balthazar made a shooing motion toward Christian to urge him up the stairs.
I'm not stalling. What is this deep suite?
Christian asked, still not moving. That's the last question I will answer on the stairs, so enjoy it. "The deep suite is the innermost suite in the back of the house," he said. "I like it best because it's a calming space."
You like to be calm when you're having sex and feeding?
Christian's eyebrows rose. Balthazar let out a bark of laughter. His fledgling was direct. He should remember that. "That's another question, but just for fun, I'll answer it. Yes, I do. The line between sex and violence, feeding and violence is very thin, so I like things to be peaceful. When I was first turned, we killed the humans we fed from more often than not. The killing was part of the experience."
Your master, Rowan Tithe, right? He made you do that, didn't he?
Christian's voice was a bare whisper, but it held a note of horror and sympathy. Yes, he did. His voice was flat. It often went that way when talking about Rowan, even if he tried to control it. But he was also of his time. Many of the vampires made during the wars were violent. That's all they knew. He was of that class.
That doesn't excuse...
No, it doesn't. I killed him. I ended him. Because there are limits that I believe must be honored. Many vampires don't feel as I do, Balthazar explained, though he knew that it was hardly an explanation at all. There was so much that Christian didn't know about vampires, so much he might hate. But Balthazar wanted him to fall in love with the night first, so that when he found the ugly parts that he'd survive the blow easier. I have rules, Christian, that we treat the acolytes with respect, that we don't hurt them, if we can help it, that we don't mess with their minds, unless we must.
Then I'm even more glad it was you who turned me.
Christian breathed. More glad? More? For the first time, Christian touched him. Balthazar held very still. It was just a brief brush of fingertips along his right cheek, brief and gone. But it happened. He resisted touching that cheek. It was a sure bet it wouldn't happen again if he did. Christian shifted from foot to foot.
Shouldn't we go to this deep suite?
Balthazar blinked. He'd gotten lost in the moment. Yes. Yes. Let's do that.
Hey guys, if you're thinking of subscribing to wraithrain.com just for the uncut podcast chapters, there's so much more to the membership. Most of what I do are written stories. So since 2010, I've had my own serial subscription site. I have 3 or 4 stories that are currently running, and I update those with 3 or 4 chapters every month a piece. In fact, the sequel to Everdark is in one of the stories I'm updating right now. Once a story is done, it's left on the site as part of the archive. There are over 12 years of completed serials between 150,000 words for a short one and over 500,000 words for a longer one like Everdark. I hope you check it out. Remember, you can get the complete, uncut, unedited, full sexy times Everdark chapters if you are a member of Wraith Rain.
They walked down a hallway to a set of double doors that led into the deep suite. Balthazar could sense over 6 vampire denizens in the house being fed, or having sex, or doing some combination of both. The earthy scent of musk, mixed with the coppery-rich scent of blood, was tantalizing and dangerous. He quickly reached over and opened the doors. Like he had when they'd entered the house, Balthazar allowed Christian to precede him. His fledgling stepped into the suite. The walls were a cool, light blue called Dream. He'd thought the paint name stupid, but whenever he rested in this suite, he did have good dreams. Oddly, they were dreams of walking by the sea, holding onto someone's hand, smiling, feeling complete. He never saw the person's face. He knew it was a man, but that was all. Balthazar came inside and closed the doors behind them as Christian stood in the middle of the center room of the suite, taking in the space. The floor was polished to a high gloss. There was a round rug with an intricate design in blues and grays. There were no windows. Glass could break. The light in the room mimicked dusk or dawn. Directly ahead of them was a large sofa with deep cushions that would allow 2 people to lay down side by side. There were 2 overly large love seats facing the sofa, and several low coffee tables of white stone. Intricate bonsai trees dotted the room, bringing the outside in. There were abstract paintings on the wall, a stripe of red, a slash of blue, a faded peach like the sunrise he'd just seen. To the right was the door to a vast bedroom with a 4-poster bed in similar colors. To the left was a bathroom, just as large as the bedroom. A shower that could fit 6. It was a comfortable space.
It is calming.
Christian said as he slowly turned to face Balthazar.
Reminds me of a mixture of a high-end spa and a house of ill repute.
Another bark of laughter exited his lips. Been to many houses of ill repute, have you, Christian? High color appeared on Christian's cheeks. But he answered,
Not many. Okay, not any. It's what I imagine one would look like. I can smell sex. These enhanced senses are quite keen. And I can even hear the slap of skin and, grunts.
Balthazar's lips twitched, but he tried not to smile. His little scientist was learning. Yes, quite.
Have you been in many houses of ill repute?
Christian looked up at him through his dark lashes. Those lashes should have been criminal. They were so effective in distracting him. Oh, God, yes. Of course, he answered. Christian's eyes widened.
Truly?
Back in my day, there was to be no sex before marriage. Not with the woman you were to marry in your class, and certainly not with the lads that attracted me. He smoothed his hands down his front.
But if you went to a whorehouse, then you were having sex before marriage. But I suppose it didn't count.
Christian answered his own question. Exactly. What you did in those places was simply not discussed if you were a young man with blue blood and enough coin to silence mouths. He shrugged. It was a different time. Now there's no need for it. People are open to most anything.
How do you make acolytes? How do you decide who's going to be one? I mean, Laura? I remember her as a nice, if nondescript girl in high school.
Christian's eyes were bright with interest.
How do you know if someone will keep your secret, rather than running to the media? The Iros can control minds, but not every vampire can do that, right?
Every vampire can control human minds to a certain extent. It's called seduction. But yes, it is much easier for an Iros to make an offer to a human than, let's say, a Kali. Though the Kali would likely just kill the human and reanimate their corpse.
Reanimate?
He waved the inevitable question away. That's going too far afield. I told you about the powers that each bloodline has. That's theirs. But the thing is that we can take more chances with the people we turn to our side than the others. We can wipe the minds of those who end up not working out. Like Ray.
But is there something that you see in that person? Clearly you don't take in everyone.
Christian pointed out. Balthazar nodded. You're right. We mostly pick those in power, like politicians or the wealthy. We also target those professions that we need, like doctors and lawyers and police officers. We also heavily influence the military. Don't want them going after us in the end. Not that most vampires couldn't just retreat to the Everdark and strike out for humans when needed. But still, better to nip that in the bud.
Laura isn't any of those things. She's normal, maybe even boring.
Christian said with a curl of his lip. True. You see then, there are the acolytes we choose because their personalities indicate they would be willing to be fed from, Balthazar said and watched Christian's reaction. A frown line appeared on Christian's forehead, and he wasn't surprised. This would be difficult for someone like Christian, who restricted who touched him or even looked at him, might not be able to put himself into these types of acolytes' headspaces.
They want to be fed from?
Christian clarified. They love it. They want to surrender, or be made to surrender, he said. Christian scrubbed his face with those elegant hands.
Is there always sex with feeding?
That's a very good question. Why don't we sit down and talk about it? He gestured to the sofa. Christian looked at the sofa for a very long time. He went to one of the chairs and settled himself there. Balthazar chuckled, but went to sit himself on the sofa. You are going to have to come near me to feed, fledgling, he said as he settled himself down, one arm stretched over the sofa back and his legs indolently crossed.
I will when the time comes.
Christian regarded him coolly.
So, you were going to tell me about feeding and sex?
I'd rather show you.
I'm sure you would.
Christian's lips almost twitched into a smile. Vampires are all about pleasure. So yes, feeding and sex are intertwined. Feeding and violence are too, as I said before, Balthazar answered. Feeding from me, you won't be violent against your master, will help you control your instinct later with others.
Do you expect sex when I feed from you?
To the point. I wouldn't mind it, Balthazar answered truthfully, seeing no reaction from Christian, which made him think he should say more himself. Balthazar uncrossed and recrossed his legs before expanding. I don't expect anything. I will feed you no matter if you ever let me touch you in any other way. You are my fledgling. The question is really, do you want to? Christian swallowed. But nothing will happen unless you want it to happen, Balthazar assured him. I take no pleasure in forcing myself on anyone, and I'll try not to be offended that you're worried about that.
I don't know you,
Christian answered softly. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees.
You don't seem like the type, but seeming and being are two different things.
Have you? Balthazar paused. He wasn't sure how to ask this, or if he should. He wanted to know if Christian had been attacked. He knew that nothing had happened to the young man since he started watching over him, but that was only for the past 8 years. Things could have happened before that. Have you had aggressive people in your life? He nearly rolled his eyes. Christian was direct, but he couldn't quite make himself ask something so boldly.
You're asking if I have personal reasons to distrust men?
This was as indirect as Christian had ever been. Yes.
I don't trust anyone,
Christian answered. That was not an answer, but I will leave it for now. I will earn your trust, Christian, Balthazar promised. Christian nodded, which showed neither belief nor disbelief.
So will you have sex with Sheila?
No, he laughed quietly.
Why not?
Christian's eyes narrowed. She's a grandmotherly type, he answered.
She's old?
She's 67, he answered. Christian blinked.
I had this idea that you would only feed from nubile young men.
Balthazar snorted. I do enjoy those types, for sure. But don't you like it when your mother makes you a meal? Isn't it comforting?
My mother is not my meal.
Christian was giving him that very narrow-eyed stare again. He nodded. No, but Sheila is loving, kind, gentle, tender, and she's been doing this a long time for us. She knows what she's doing, so that will be a good thing for you.
You want to sanitize the vampire world for me. Why?
I'm not sanitizing it. I'm carefully curating it, just at first. Believe me, you'll see much in a short time, but you're just beginning and things should be simpler, he told Christian. In this age, people moved so quickly. Christian was a child of change. He was used to getting everything now. It was hard to explain, or maybe hard for him to understand, that he had eternity. His fledgling was quiet for a moment, arms crossed over his chest and eyes thoughtful. He nibbled his lower lip and glanced at Balthazar, and then away, then back again. Finally, Christian said,
You were willing to feed both Julian and me before you fed yourself. Can I feed from you for a moment now?
Balthazar blinked. Yes, of course, if you wish.
Just a little. I want to focus, and I can't. My thoughts are muddy.
Christian admitted. I'm amazed at your strength so far. Balthazar's heart began to race, but he held himself very, very still again. Do you want me to come to you, or?
I'll come to you.
In order to stay within YouTube community guidelines, the next section of the podcast has been edited. To get the full version, either subscribe to Wraith Rain as a member, or buy the audiobook from the Wraith Rain shop. The Everdark podcast by Ex Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thillis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.